welcome to the third week of the Cuddle Monster Crochet Along Together. This week we're going to be working on the horns. There's a little bit of shaping involved. Make sure you've got this week's copy of the pattern with you ready to go, and we'll get started. For the horns, we're going to start with the left horn, and you're going to use your strand of Haiku Simplicity in your contrasting color and a 3.0 millimeter hook. And you're going to chain 30 and slip stitch to join. After you chain 30, it's time to slip stitch join, and be careful not to get your chain twisted. And work into those top loops of the chains. Now the horns are worked in the back loop, but the very first foundation chain, the best way you can get that effect of the back loop is just by working into the top loop of your chains. So slip stitch, and then you're going to put a single crochet in that same chain and each chain around. And you may want to use a stitch marker to keep track of the beginning of your round. When you get back to the beginning of the round, you're ready to start working in the back loops from round 2 and from here on out. So make sure you're just catching the back loop when you work your single crochets. And what this does is it creates this kind of ridge in between your rounds to kind of give the horn some texture. So we'll do that for the rest of round 2. Now when you get ready to start round 3, this is where the shaping for the horn is going to take place. So it seems a little tricky, it seems a little off, but just trust the pattern and go with it. So for round 3, for this first horn, which is the left horn, we're going to single crochet 2 together and single crochet in the next 3 single crochet 3 times total. So we're essentially doing a decrease and 3 single crochet. Remember to continue working in the back loop. Once you've done that 3 times, then what you're going to do is you're going to do 2 single crochet in the next single crochet, and then single crochet in the next 4 single crochet 3 times. So now we're increasing. So we'll do an increase, and then just 1 single crochet in each of the next 4. What this is doing is it's going to give us that nice kind of curved up appearance. So the rest of the horn is a combination of these shaping rows with some decreasing rows. So make sure to follow your pattern, keeping track of how many decreases there are and how far apart they are, and you should be well on your way to making your horn. When you get to the last round of your horn, just cut, leaving a decently long tail. I like to do one last chain and pull my end through. Then you're going to sew the last 6 stitches together, kind of like we did in the top of the body. For the horn, I like to kind of keep it in pattern, so I like to just grab the back loops only, up through the first one, down through the second one, and up through the third one, and so on. So you can see you can kind of pull 2 at once. And just kind of this down and up motion until you've gotten all the way around, and then your horn is secure. And what you can do is you can just thread, or not thread, you can just put your needle through the top of your horn and push it through and leave your tail inside of the horn. But careful not to pull too hard and kind of cave in the top of your horn. You want it to be pointy. So this is the left horn, and the right horn is essentially the exact same but mirrored. So when you start working on the shaping rows, you're going to have your increases first and then your decreases, and that's what's going to give us this mirrored effect. Once you've finished both of your horns, it's time to stuff it. Let's get some stuffing, and then we're going to sew it to the head. So I like to try to shove just a little bit of stuffing up in that tip because it's not very big. And if you ball a bunch up here, I find it hard to get some up in there. So once you've got the tip filled, you can go to fill in the rest. This one you can stuff a little more dense than the body because it doesn't need to be as squishy. And I like to push it down in, so it gives me room to sew. And again, once the horn gets on, you can start squishing it and you see the stuffing will fill up that area. So it might feel a little tighter than you want it as you're sewing, but you're going to want that space to be able to sew to the body a little more easily. Once you finish both of your horns, it's now time to stuff them and sew them to the head. When you stuff the horn, stuff just a little bit up in that tip. Because I find if you ball up your stuffing here, none of it will actually get up there. And you can stuff this more firmly than the body. It doesn't need to be as squishy. And then I like to really compact it in when I'm sewing, kind of like we did with the body. It gives us room here to sew easily and we don't have to worry about going through the stuffing. And then once the horn is on the monster, you can squeeze the horn and the stuffing will fill in that space. Now, let's say you have a short end like I did. Let's say your tail's not quite long enough for sewing. Well, you can just tuck that tail inside of your horn and cut a new piece of yarn to sew your horn down with, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, as far as placement goes, you want to pretend there's an imaginary line right down the center of your monster. So your horn is going to be on that line. And then from the front, you want the horns to be in the upper left for the left horn and the upper right for the right horn, again on that invisible line down the center of the monster. So this looks like a good spot for this horn. And you can pin the horn in place if you'd like. It may make it a little easier to work. I usually don't because I find that as I'm sewing things down, I end up moving the horn around anyways and taking all of the pins out. But it's a personal preference. So make sure you also are far enough away from your eyelashes too. If you have to use another piece of yarn to sew your horn down, you can start anywhere. If you're using your tail, you'll have to start where it's attached to the horn. And if you are using a new piece, when you go down into the monster and come up through your first stitch, now this is the foundation chain that we made, this is that other side that we didn't work into, you're going to want to leave a little bit of a tail. And we can just sew that into the monster later. And then as you're sewing, make sure when you go down into the monster that you're actually getting into the body and not just grabbing some caribou hairs, because that won't actually secure the horn down. So it will take a little bit of muscle work, but just be patient. Be careful not to sew the caribou into the horn. Kind of pull it down out of the way as we've been doing. And just go one stitch at a time. And every couple of stitches that you sew down, recheck your position and make sure you're sewing it down where you want your horn to be. And if you find out that you haven't, no big deal, don't worry, you can just pull your stitches out one by one and redo it until you're happy with the position of your horn. So I'm about halfway through the horn here and I'm just checking to make sure I'm happy with the position, kind of pushing it up into place where I want it to be. And right before you finish and you still have a few stitches left, you can go ahead and squeeze on that horn and let that stuffing fill the base. And you can decide if you think you need more stuffing, or if you've overstuffed, you can even take some out at this point before you close it up. I am happy with what I've got, so I'm going to keep going and sew the rest of this up. So once you've finished sewing your horn down all the way around, you can just take your tail close to the spot that it's come out and sew through your monster like we did to close it up. And that will kind of secure your tail in place. And then if you started with a new strand of yarn like I did, you do the same thing for your beginning tail. Just go down close but not in the same place, and sew through the body of your monster. Once you've got one horn down, it's time to sew the other horn down. Again, think of that invisible line centering the two in the upper right hand corner, and don't forget to stuff it.
Alright, so at this point you should have your horns attached to the body of your monster, and next week we'll be moving on to finish up the feet and the hands. I'll see you then!